I'm Emma, 29, and my life changed forever on a crisp autumn morning in Franklin Park. I was just an ER nurse taking my usual jog when I spotted two men cornering an elderly woman. Something in me snapped. I couldn't just watch. Using my medical training, I managed to drive them away before they could hurt her. She thanked me, introduced herself only as Eleanor, and disappeared into a private car. 3 months later, I walked into my fiancé James's family mansion and came face to face with her again as his mother. Before I continue this unbelievable story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if you've ever had a coincidence change your life completely. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston where my parents taught high school and made just enough for us to live comfortably. From an early age, I knew I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. This calling became crystal clear when my grandfather fell ill during my teenage years. Watching the nurses care for him with such compassion while our family struggled with medical bills solidified my career path. I would become a nurse and help others through their darkest moments. After graduating from nursing school with honors, I landed a position at Boston General Hospital's emergency room. The work was demanding and often heartbreaking, but I thrived in the fast-paced environment. My supervisors quickly recognized my dedication, and within 3 years, I was promoted to charge nurse for the night shift. My personal life, however, didn't enjoy the same success. Dating as an ER nurse with irregular hours proved challenging. My relationship with Michael, an investment banker, ended after 8 months when he complained that I was never available. Then came David, a teacher who initially understood my schedule, but eventually grew frustrated with canceled plans and my exhaustion on days off. "You give everything to strangers and have nothing left for the people who love you," David said during our breakup conversation. His words stung because there was truth in them, but I couldn't change who I was. Thankfully, I had Sarah, my colleague and closest friend. We met during orientation at Boston General and bonded immediately. She worked in pediatric emergency and understood the toll our profession took on relationships. We supported each other through breakups, difficult cases, and the occasional breakdown after losing a patient. "The right person will understand that your compassion isn't a flaw," Sarah assured me after David left. "It's your superpower." I lived in a small but cozy apartment about 20 minutes from the hospital. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with enough space for my books, my beloved houseplants, and the occasional dinner with Sarah and a few other friends. My salary covered my needs and student loans with just enough left over for modest savings. Every morning when I wasn't working, I'd wake up at 6 for a run through Franklin Park. The routine kept me sane, giving me time to process difficult cases and clear my head before facing another shift of medical emergencies. What most people noticed about me wasn't my appearance, but my determination. Colleagues often commented on my ability to remain calm during chaos and my gentle yet firm manner with difficult patients. These traits served me well in the ER, but sometimes made me seem intense in social situations. My parents had moved to Vermont after retirement, so we spoke weekly by phone. They worried about my work-life balance, but remained proud of my career choice. During our conversations, my mother often asked if I was taking care of myself with the same concern she showed for her students. Beyond my immediate career goals, I dreamed of someday opening a community clinic for underprivileged patients. I volunteered monthly at a free clinic downtown, saving what I could toward this future goal. It seemed distant but possible until a chance encounter in the park changed everything. The morning that altered the course of my life began like any other. It was early October, with just enough chill in the air to turn the leaves golden and make my breath visible in small puffs as I jogged through Franklin Park. I had completed my usual 4-mile route and was taking a cool-down walk along the pond when something caught my attention. Near a secluded bench about 50 yards ahead, 2 men surrounded an elderly woman. At first, I thought they might be helping her. Perhaps she had fallen or needed directions. But something in their body language triggered my internal alarm. The men wore dark hoodies despite the morning warmth, and they stood too close, invading her personal space in a way that seemed deliberately intimidating. The woman appeared to be in her 70s, dressed in an elegant camel-colored coat that looked more appropriate for Newberry Street shopping than a morning in the park. Her silver hair was styled in a perfect bob, and even from a distance I could see her posture remained dignified despite her obvious distress. I slowed my pace, unsure whether to approach or call for help. Then I saw one of the men grab for her purse, while the other blocked her escape route. My decision was made instantly. Should I call the police or try to help her myself? I wondered, my heart racing. The park was relatively empty at this hour, and waiting for police might be too late. I touched my phone in my pocket but kept moving forward. My medical training included dealing with aggressive patients, and I knew some basic self-defense techniques from a class the hospital had offered. "Excuse me," I called out, jogging toward them with purposeful strides. "Is everything okay over there?" The men turned toward me, momentarily distracted. The elderly woman locked eyes with me, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. Up close, I noticed her pearl earrings and the diamond brooch fastening her scarf. This woman had money, which explained why she'd been targeted. "Mind your own business, lady." The taller man growled, his hand still gripping the woman's purse while she held on to the other end. "I believe the lady would like you to leave her alone," I replied, stopping a few feet away and assessing the situation. Neither man appeared armed, but both were substantially larger than me. "We're just helping our grandmother," the second man claimed unconvincingly, his eyes darting around to check if anyone else was nearby. The elderly woman spoke with surprising steadiness. "I certainly am not their grandmother. Please help me." That was all I needed to hear. I stepped forward, remembering my emergency training. When the first man lunged toward me, I sidestepped and used his momentum against him, applying pressure to a nerve point in his wrist that made him howl and release the purse. The second man hesitated, clearly not expecting resistance, which gave me time to position myself between them and the elderly woman. "The police are on their way," I bluffed, holding up my phone. "And there are cameras in this section of the park." This was enough to discourage them. After a few threats and curses, they backed away and then ran toward the park exit. "Are you hurt?" I asked the woman, switching immediately to nurse mode, looking her over for any signs of injury. "Just shaken, dear. Thank you for your bravery," she replied, her voice cultured and composed despite the circumstances. I should have known better than to take my morning walk through a secluded area. "I'm Emma," I said, helping her to the bench. "I'm a nurse at Boston General. May I check your pulse?" Sometimes shock can affect your heart rate. She allowed me to check her vitals, which were surprisingly stable for someone who had just experienced a traumatic event. "I'm Eleanor," she offered, though I noticed she didn't provide a last name. "And I'm quite all right thanks to your quick thinking. Where did you learn those defensive moves?" "The hospital offers safety courses for staff," I explained. "We sometimes deal with aggressive patients in the ER." We heard sirens approaching, and within minutes 2 police officers arrived. Someone else in the park must have called them after seeing the commotion. Eleanor surprised me by declining to file a formal report. "I'd rather avoid the publicity," she told the officers. "Nothing was taken, and I'm unharmed. This young woman scared them off before anything serious happened." The officers seemed to recognize Eleanor, treating her with unusual deference. They took my contact information, but didn't press the issue when Eleanor insisted she wanted no further action taken. "At least let me walk you home," I offered after the police left. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. My driver is waiting at the park entrance," Eleanor explained. "He was getting my usual coffee when this happened. I'm afraid Richard will be quite upset with both of us when he learns about this incident." Before I could ask who Richard was, Eleanor reached into her purse and withdrew a delicate lace-trimmed handkerchief with the monogram EH embroidered in the corner. "Please take this as a token of my appreciation," she said, pressing it into my hand. "It may seem old-fashioned, but it's something to remember that there are still good people in this world." I accepted the gift, oddly touched by the gesture. As we walked toward the park exit, a sleek black town car pulled up. The driver, an older man in a crisp uniform, rushed out with an alarmed expression. "Mrs. Hamilton, are you all right? I should never have left you alone." "Don't fuss, George. Thanks to this young woman, I'm perfectly fine," Eleanor assured him. She turned to me one last time. "Thank you again, Emma. I won't forget your kindness." With that, she disappeared into the car, leaving me holding the monogrammed handkerchief and wondering about the elegant woman I had helped. Little did I know that our paths would cross again in the most unexpected way. Life has a funny way of bringing people together. 6 weeks after the incident in the park, I was working a particularly grueling shift in the ER when paramedics rushed in with a man holding a bloodied towel around his hand. "Sailing accident," the paramedic explained. 34-year-old male with a deep laceration to the right palm. Stable vitals." I helped transfer the patient to an examination room and began the initial assessment. Despite being in obvious pain, he smiled warmly at me. "I'm James," he said, his voice steady despite his injury. "James Hamilton. And you are?" "Emma. I'll be your nurse today," I replied professionally, though I couldn't help noticing how his blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Let's take a look at that hand." As I carefully removed the towel, James winced but continued making conversation. "Do you enjoy sailing, Emma?" "I've actually never been." I admitted, examining the wound. "This is going to need stitches, but no tendons appear to be damaged. The doctor will be in shortly to confirm." "Then I'll have to take you some time," James replied with a confidence that wasn't arrogant, just matter of fact. "Once I can hold the ropes again, of course." I smiled politely but didn't encourage the flirtation. I'd learned long ago not to mix my personal and professional lives. But over the next hour, as the doctor stitched his wound, and I assisted, James continued to charm us both with stories about his sailing misadventure. The wind changed suddenly, and the boom swung across. I grabbed the wrong part of the rigging, trying to stabilize it, he explained. "Rookie mistake. My father would be appalled after all those summers teaching me." When I returned with discharge instructions, James asked for my number. I declined, gently citing hospital policy, which wasn't strictly true, but seemed the safest response. "Then I'll just have to come back for my follow-up and ask again," he said with a good-natured smile that made it hard to be annoyed by his persistence. True to his word, James returned a week later for his scheduled wound check. This time he brought coffee for the entire nursing station and asked me out again while the doctor examined his healing stitches. Again, I declined. On his third visit, when the stitches were removed, he arrived with a small potted orchid. "The receptionist mentioned you like plants," he explained. "This isn't a bribe, just a thank you for excellent care." His genuine manner and respect for my initial refusals softened my resolve. When he asked one more time if I would join him for dinner, I surprised myself by accepting. Our first date was at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor where the maitre d' greeted James by name. I felt immediately out of place in my simple black dress among the wealthy patrons with their designer outfits and confident demeanors. "You look beautiful," James said, noticing my discomfort, "and more authentic than everyone else here." Throughout dinner, James showed genuine interest in my work and background. Unlike my previous dates who quickly steered conversations away from depressing hospital stories, James asked thoughtful questions about why I became a nurse and the challenges I faced. "Your passion for helping others is remarkable," he said. "I deal with investment portfolios all day. The stakes are high financially, but not like what you face." "What exactly do you do?" I asked, realizing he had been vague about his work. "Family business," James replied. "Hamilton Investments. We manage wealth for various clients and institutions. Not nearly as interesting as saving lives." I appreciated his modesty, but sensed there was more to the story. The restaurant staff's deference and the casual way James mentioned his sailing club suggested significant wealth beyond a typical investment advisor. Our worlds couldn't have been more different, yet we connected over shared values and complementary personalities. James appreciated my straightforward nature and compassion, while I found his optimism and thoughtfulness refreshing. After dinner, James walked me to my door, but didn't pressure me for more than a goodnight kiss. "I'd like to see you again," he said simply. Over the next 3 months, we saw each other whenever my schedule allowed. James adjusted to my unpredictable hours without complaint, sometimes bringing dinner to my apartment after a long shift, or understanding when I needed to reschedule last minute. Gradually, James revealed more about his background. The family business was actually a vast financial empire started by his great-grandfather. The Hamiltons were old Boston money with investments spanning real estate technology and global markets. "Does it bother you?" he asked one evening as we sat on my small balcony. "The financial disparity between us?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Our worlds are very different." "But we're not so different," James countered, taking my hand. "We both value honesty, hard work, and making a difference in our own ways." Sarah remained skeptical about the relationship. "It's moving too fast," she warned over lunch in the hospital cafeteria. "Guys like that, they live in a different reality. Just be careful." Perhaps she was right about the pace. After only 3 months of dating during a weekend at his waterfront condo, James proposed with a vintage diamond ring. "It was my grandmother's," he explained as I stared speechless at the substantial stone. "The Hamiltons have a tradition of passing down jewelry to welcome new members into the family." I hesitated, overwhelmed by both the ring and the implications of joining a family I hadn't even met. "I know it's soon," James acknowledged. "But when you know, you know. I love your strength, your compassion, and your independence. I don't want to change any of that. I want it in my life permanently." His sincerity won me over, and I said yes, though I insisted on a long engagement. James agreed, but was eager for me to meet his family. "Especially my mother," he said. "She's quite particular, but I know she'll love you once she gets to know you." Little did I know just how particular Eleanor Hamilton would prove to be, or that we had already met under extraordinary circumstances. 3 weeks after our engagement, James suggested we spend the weekend at his family estate. Despite my growing comfort with James himself, the prospect of meeting his family and seeing their home filled me with anxiety. "What should I wear?" I asked Sarah during our lunch break. "I've never been to a place described as an estate before." Sarah helped me shop for appropriately elegant but understated outfits for the weekend. "Remember, you're not trying to fit into their world," she advised. "James chose you for who you are." As reassuring as those words were, my stomach still knotted with nervousness when James picked me up Friday afternoon in his sleek Audi. The drive took us north of Boston into the affluent suburbs where properties grew larger and more secluded. "My family has owned Oakwood since 1910, James explained as we turned onto a private road. "My great-grandfather built it after the shipping business took off." I wasn't prepared for what Oakwood actually meant. After passing through impressive iron gates and driving up a winding driveway lined with ancient trees, a mansion appeared that looked more like a small European castle than a family home. Built from gray stone with multiple chimneys and a slate roof, it sprawled across the landscape with perfect symmetry. "This is where you grew up?" I asked, trying to keep the shock from my voice. James nodded, seemingly unaware of how intimidating his childhood home appeared. "The East Wing has the best views of the garden. I made sure they prepared that guest room for you." "Guest room, we're not staying together." James smiled apologetically. "My mother is traditional about certain things, just for the first visit until we're married." This was my first glimpse of how family expectations might shape our relationship, and it made me uneasy. As James parked in front of the grand entrance, I noticed security cameras discreetly positioned around the property and a guard station near the gate we had passed through. "The security seems intense," I commented. "There was an incident recently," James explained vaguely. "My mother was accosted during one of her outings. Since then, my father increased security." My nursing instincts perked up. "Was she hurt?" "Fortunately, no. Someone intervened before anything happened, but it rattled the whole family, especially my father." As we approached the massive front door, it swung open before James could reach for it. A man in his 60s wearing a suit greeted us with formal politeness. "Welcome home, Mr. Hamilton. Your parents are waiting in the main sitting room." "Thank you, Jenkins. This is my fiancé, Emma." "Very pleased to meet you, Miss Emma." Jenkins gave a slight bow. "May I take your bags to your room?" I thanked him, still processing the reality of household staff and the sheer grandeur of the entrance hall with its marble floors and sweeping staircase. "Ready." James squeezed my hand reassuringly before leading me through a doorway into what he had called the main sitting room, a space larger than my entire apartment filled with antique furniture and original artwork. A distinguished-looking man with silver hair, and James's blue eyes rose from a leather chair as we entered. Richard Hamilton had the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power, but greeted me with unexpected warmth. "Emma, we've heard so much about you." He clasped my hand in both of his. "James tells us you're a miracle worker in the emergency room." "Hardly a miracle worker," I replied, relaxing slightly at his friendly manner. "Just doing my job." "And a modest one, too." Richard smiled. "James mentioned you grew up in Boston proper." We chatted comfortably about my background and work, while James poured drinks from a crystal decanter. I noticed Richard glancing occasionally toward the doorway. "Eleanor is just finishing some correspondence," he explained, following my gaze. "She's been quite engaged with her charity foundation since the incident." "James mentioned something happened to her recently," I said. "I hope she wasn't too shaken by it." "It affected her more than she admits," Richard replied. "Eleanor has always been independent, taking her morning walks alone despite my objections. After what happened at the park..." He was interrupted by the distinct sound of heels on marble. We all turned toward the doorway as Eleanor Hamilton made her entrance. My glass nearly slipped from my hand as I recognized the elegant woman I had helped in Franklin Park that morning. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as our gazes met, the only indication that she recognized me as well. "Mother, this is Emma, my fiancé," James said, oblivious to our mutual shock. Eleanor composed herself instantly, years of social training evident in her smooth recovery. "Emma, how lovely to meet you. James has told us so much about you." She extended her hand, and I shook it automatically, still processing this incredible coincidence. The woman I had defended from attackers was my fiancé's mother, the formidable Eleanor Hamilton. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Hamilton," I managed to reply. "Please call me Eleanor." Her grip tightened slightly before releasing my hand, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. Throughout dinner in the formal dining room, I kept catching Eleanor studying me when she thought I wasn't looking. The conversation flowed with James and Richard discussing business matters while Eleanor asked pointed questions about my family background and career aspirations. "Nursing is such a noble profession," she commented, "though I imagine the hours make a normal social life challenging." "It can be difficult," I acknowledged, "but I find the work fulfilling." "And how do you envision balancing such demands with married life?" she asked. "James often has social obligations that require a partner's presence." Before I could answer, Richard intervened. "Eleanor, let's not interrogate Emma on her first visit." Eleanor smiled graciously. "Of course. I'm simply curious about how she envisions her future with our son." The dinner continued with subtle undercurrents of tension, though James seemed blissfully unaware, proudly sharing stories about my work in the emergency room. Later, as a maid served coffee in yet another ornate sitting room, Eleanor turned to me with perfect politeness. "Emma, I wonder if you might join me for tea tomorrow morning. I'd love to show you the gardens when the light is best." "I'd be delighted," I replied, recognizing the invitation for what it was, an opportunity to speak privately about our previous encounter. As Jenkins showed me to my guest room later that evening, I noticed the handkerchief Eleanor had given me after the attack sitting on my nightstand beside a small vase of fresh flowers. The monogrammed EH seemed to mock me now, a reminder that my simple act of kindness had unexpectedly entangled me with one of Boston's most powerful families. The coincidence was too perfect to be random, leaving me with unsettling questions. Had Eleanor known who I was all along? And more importantly, what did she think of her son marrying the woman who had witnessed her moment of vulnerability? Sleep eluded me that night despite the luxurious comfort of my guest room. The four-poster bed with its silky sheets and down pillows should have been heaven after my IKEA mattress, but my mind raced with questions about Eleanor Hamilton and what our private conversation might bring. At dawn, I gave up on sleep and decided to explore the mansion. The hallways were silent, except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. Original oil paintings lined the walls, landscapes, family portraits, and what appeared to be valuable historical pieces. Each room I glanced into contained furnishings that belonged in a museum rather than a home. In a sunlit gallery, I found photographs documenting generations of Hamiltons sailing at charity galas, shaking hands with presidents and world leaders. The scope of their influence became increasingly clear, as did the vast gulf between their world and mine. I paused at a recent family photo showing James with his parents at some formal event. They looked regal and completely at ease in their wealth, while I still felt awkward when James took me to upscale restaurants. "That was taken at last year's Hamilton Foundation Gala," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Eleanor already perfectly dressed in a cashmere sweater and tailored slacks despite the early hour. The photographer caught James's smile perfectly. She continued moving beside me to study the image. "He has his father's expressions." "You're up early," I commented, suddenly aware of my borrowed pajamas and messy bun. "Old habits," Eleanor replied. "I've always been an early riser. It's when the house is most peaceful." She gestured toward a doorway. Since we're both awake, shall we have that tea now? The morning room catches the earliest sun. I followed her to a charming east-facing room filled with plants and comfortable seating. A tea service had already been prepared, steam rising from the silver pot. "Jenkins knows my schedule," Eleanor explained, noticing my surprise at the ready tea. "One of the comforts of a well-run household." She poured 2 cups with practiced grace, handed one to me, then settled into a chair indicating I should take the one opposite. For a moment we sipped in silence, the unspoken recognition of our previous meeting hanging between us. Eleanor spoke first. "I believe we have a mutual experience that we've not acknowledged." "Yes," I replied simply. "Franklin Park about 2 months ago." She nodded. "I wondered if you would mention it last night." "I wasn't sure if you wanted James and Richard to know," I said. "You seemed, a private about the incident with the police." "Perceptive of you." Eleanor set down her teacup. "Richard becomes exceedingly protective when he feels I've been threatened. After 50 years of marriage, I've learned which concerns to bring to him and which to handle myself. The handkerchief you left in my room was your way of letting me know you recognized me." "A reminder of our first meeting," Eleanor confirmed. "And an acknowledgement of my gratitude. Your intervention that day was both brave and skillful." "Anyone would have helped," I said, downplaying my actions as I had that day. "We both know that's not true." Eleanor's gaze was direct and assessing. "Many people would have looked away or simply called for help that would have arrived too late. You chose immediate action at personal risk." I shrugged uncomfortably at the praise. "My training makes me respond to emergencies." "Indeed." Eleanor studied me. "What troubles me, Emma, is the extraordinary coincidence that the woman who saved me from a mugging is now engaged to my son after a remarkably brief courtship." The implication was clear and it stung. "You think I orchestrated our meeting, that I'm pursuing James because of your family's wealth. You must admit the timing raises questions," Eleanor said coolly. "James has been pursued for his position before." "I didn't even know who you were that day in the park." I countered my nurse's composure, giving way to genuine hurt. "You introduced yourself only as Eleanor. No last name, no mention of your family, and I met James weeks later through my work at the hospital. Yet here you are engaged after only 3 months. That was James's decision as much as mine," I said, my voice rising slightly before I controlled it. "If you have concerns about the speed of our relationship, perhaps you should discuss them with your son." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly at my directness. "James has always led with his heart rather than his head. As his mother, I need to consider what others might not." "Including whether his fiancé is a gold digger who staged a fake rescue to ingratiate herself with the Hamilton family." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed despite my anger. "When you've lived with wealth as long as I have, you become cautious about motivations," Eleanor replied. "James has been hurt before by women who saw him as a lifestyle rather than a person." I set down my teacup with careful control. "Mrs. Hamilton Eleanor, I understand your protective instinct, but I fell in love with James before I knew anything about the Hamilton fortune. I fell in love with his kindness, his optimism, and how he values my work. If anything, learning about all this," I gestured at our opulent surroundings, "has made our relationship more complicated, not more appealing." Eleanor watched me with an inscrutable expression. "You genuinely care for him." "I do, and I have no interest in changing my career or who I am to fit into this world." A subtle shift occurred in Eleanor's demeanor, not quite approval, but a reassessment. "That's refreshingly direct. Most of James's previous girlfriends were eager to adapt to our lifestyle." I'm not most people, I stated simply. No, Eleanor agreed with the hint of a smile. You're certainly not, which is perhaps why my son is so enamored with you. Our conversation was interrupted by Jenkins announcing breakfast was served. As we walked to the morning dining room, Eleanor surprised me by linking her arm with mine. I appreciate your honesty, Emma, and your discretion regarding our first meeting. There's no need to mention it to James or Richard unless it comes up naturally. I agreed, though the secrecy made me slightly uncomfortable. This conversation had cleared the air somewhat, but I sensed Eleanor Hamilton was still evaluating me, still deciding whether I was worthy of her son and the Hamilton name. When James joined us for breakfast, beaming at seeing his mother and fiancé chatting amicably, I returned his smile while wondering what other complexities lay beneath the surface of the family I was planning to join. Later that day, James gave me a tour of the estate grounds, proudly showing off the gardens his mother had designed and the boathouse where he learned to sail as a child. Everything about Oakwood spoke of established wealth and privilege that had existed for generations, a stark contrast to my family's modest means and my own financial struggles with student loans. "Do you think you could be happy here?" James asked as we walked beside a reflecting pool. "I know it's all a bit much at first, but it grows on you." "It's beautiful," I acknowledged, "but so different from everything I know." "We don't have to live here," James assured me. "I have my condo in the city, though Mother would love if we took the West Wing after the wedding. It's practically a separate house." The casual way he discussed such opulence highlighted the differences in our backgrounds. As we continued our tour, I began to wonder, could I truly belong in this world without losing myself? And was Eleanor right to question whether someone from my background could navigate the complexities of Hamilton family life? That evening, Richard invited me to his study, a wood-paneled room filled with leather-bound books and maritime artifacts. Unlike the formal sitting rooms, this space felt personal, with photographs of family sailing trips and Richard's college rowing team displayed alongside business awards. "I wanted a moment to speak with you privately," Richard said, offering me a seat in one of the comfortable leather chairs by the fireplace. "Eleanor mentioned you had a good conversation this morning." "We did," I replied carefully, unsure how much Eleanor had shared with her husband. Richard smiled warmly. "You've made quite an impression on her, which isn't easy. Eleanor values authenticity above all else, a quality often lacking in our social circle." "She seems very protective of your family," I observed. "With good reason." Richard gazed at a family photograph on his desk. "The Hamilton name opens doors, but also attracts certain opportunists. We've had to develop a healthy skepticism over the years." "James mentioned something about that," I said. "Previous relationships that ended badly." Richard nodded, his expression darkening. "Alexandra was the worst, a social climber who broke James's heart 3 years ago. She was more interested in the family connections than in James himself. When he discovered she'd been feeding information to gossip columnists about the family, it devastated him. This explained some of Eleanor's suspicions, though it didn't make her accusations any less hurtful. "I want you to know something about Eleanor and myself." Richard continued, surprising me by changing the subject. "We didn't always live like this." "What do you mean?" Richard's eyes crinkled with a nostalgic smile. "Eleanor came from money old Boston family like the Hamiltons, but I didn't. My father was the groundskeeper for her family's summer home in Cape Cod." This revelation startled me. "But the Hamilton business was struggling when I married into the family," Richard finished. "Eleanor's father took a chance on me because I had ideas to modernize their investment approach. I worked my way through college on scholarship and married the boss's daughter, much to the horror of Boston society." "I had no idea," I said, seeing Richard in a new light. "James never mentioned it." "It's ancient history now." Richard shrugged. "But I recognize the look you get sometimes, like you're not quite sure you belong. I wore that same expression for the first 10 years of our marriage." His candor touched me deeply. "How did you overcome it?" "I focused on what I could contribute rather than what I lacked," Richard replied. "Eleanor never cared about the social disparity between us. She valued my drive and perspective qualities that came from my different background." "Did her parents approve of your relationship?" "Eventually," Richard chuckled. "Her father faster than her mother. Sound familiar?" I smiled at the parallel. Eleanor still seems to be making up her mind about me. "Give her time," Richard advised. "She warms slowly, but loves fiercely. What matters is that James has chosen you, and having met you, I understand why. You have a strength of character that will serve you well in this family." Our conversation was interrupted when James appeared at the study door, looking between us with curiosity. "Are you two conspiring without me?" "Just getting acquainted," Richard replied, standing to clap his son on the shoulder. "Emma was telling me about her community clinic plans." I hadn't mentioned the clinic, but appreciated Richard's discretion about our actual conversation. "Dad was a scholarship kid too," James told me. "He understands the value of hard work better than anyone I know." "Your father has been sharing some family history," I said, exchanging a knowing look with Richard. The remainder of the weekend passed more comfortably after these conversations. Though Eleanor maintained her formal demeanor, I occasionally caught glimpses of warmth when she thought no one was watching. At Sunday brunch, she surprised me by asking detailed questions about my volunteer work at the free clinic, showing genuine interest in healthcare access issues. As James drove me back to my apartment Sunday evening, I felt conflicted. The Hamiltons had been welcoming in their way, but the vast differences between our worlds seemed more apparent than ever. "What did you think of Oakwood?" James asked, reaching for my hand across the console. "It's impressive," I answered honestly, "but a bit overwhelming." "You'll get used to it," he assured me. "Everyone does eventually." His casual confidence that I would adapt to his world rather than us creating our own troubled me, as did the lingering question of why Eleanor had kept our previous meeting secret. These concerns followed me into work the next morning, where the familiar chaos of the emergency room provided a welcome return to my reality. "So," Sarah cornered me during our break, "how was the Royal Palace?" "Beautiful, intimidating, complicated." I summarized the weekend, including the shocking discovery that Eleanor was the woman I had helped in the park, though I omitted her insinuations about my motivations. Sarah's eyes widened. "That's some coincidence. Almost too perfect." "What do you mean?" "Just that." "Well, what are the odds Boston's a big city?" "You think she planned it somehow? That's ridiculous." "Not planned, maybe, but the timing is strange. You help a wealthy woman, then weeks later, her son shows up in your ER and pursues you relentlessly." Sarah shrugged. "I'm just saying, rich families can be complicated." Her words echoed Eleanor's suspicions, but in reverse planting a seed of doubt. Could the Hamiltons have orchestrated our meeting for some reason? It seemed far-fetched, yet the coincidence was remarkable. That evening, I decided to do something I'd avoided since meeting James. I researched the Hamilton family online. News articles detailed their business holdings, philanthropic work, and occasional appearances in society pages. Nothing seemed suspicious until I found a business announcement from 6 months earlier. Hamilton Investments had recently acquired a healthcare services company that operated several hospitals in New England, including Boston General. The revelation sent a chill through me. James had never mentioned his family's connection to my workplace. Was this simply an oversight or deliberate omission, and could this acquisition explain our seemingly chance meeting? With growing unease, I called James. "Did you know your family's company owns Boston General?" I asked without preamble when he answered. A pause. "Yes, it was part of a healthcare portfolio acquisition earlier this year." "And you didn't think to mention this when you showed up in my ER?" "I didn't want it to influence how you saw me," James explained. "People treat me differently when they know about the family business connections." His reasoning made sense, but the omission still bothered me. "What else haven't you told me?" "Emma, it wasn't a deliberate secret. I liked that you treated me normally." I wanted to believe him, but doubts crept in. "Your mother recognized me immediately at your house. She gave me a handkerchief after the park incident that she made sure was in my guest room. Don't you find that strange?" "Mother has always had a flair for the dramatic," James said dismissively. "She probably thought it was a meaningful gesture." "James, be honest with me. Was our meeting actually a coincidence?" "What are you suggesting?" His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "I don't know. But the timing, your family acquiring my hospital, your mother's behavior, it's a lot of coincidences." "You think my family engineered some elaborate scheme to get me to date an ER nurse? That makes no sense, Emma. Why would we do that?" "Put that way, it did sound ridiculous." "I don't know. I'm just trying to understand all these connections." "The only connection that matters is between us," James insisted. "Everything else is circumstantial. I fell in love with you because you're compassionate, dedicated, and real, not because of some family plot." I wanted to believe him, but the weekend at Oakwood had revealed how different our worlds truly were. "I need some time to think, James. This is all happening very fast." His voice softened. "Take whatever time you need. But please don't let class differences or coincidences make you doubt what we have." After we hung up, I stared at the engagement ring on my finger, a Hamilton family heirloom worth more than I would earn in years. The weight of it suddenly felt oppressive, a symbol of a world I wasn't sure I wanted to join. That night I made a decision. I needed to speak with Eleanor Hamilton again, woman to woman, without James or Richard present. Only then might I understand what I was truly walking into with this marriage. The following day, I called Eleanor directly using the number James had given me for emergencies. Her assistant answered, but when I identified myself, I was quickly put through. "Emma, this is unexpected," Eleanor said, her tone revealing nothing. "I need to speak with you," I replied. "Privately, about James and other matters." A brief pause. "I see. I have a foundation meeting this afternoon, but I could see you at 4. Would you prefer to meet at Oakwood or somewhere in the city?" "The city would be better. I have a morning shift at the hospital." "There's a tea room at the Gardner Museum. Quiet, discreet. I'll have my assistant make arrangements." The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum seemed an appropriate choice, a wealthy woman's former home turned into a public institution. I arrived early, taking comfort in the familiar surroundings. I had visited often as a nursing student, finding peace in the courtyard garden when studies became overwhelming. Eleanor arrived precisely at 4, dressed impeccably as always. After ordering tea, she addressed me directly. "I assume this conversation concerns your doubts about marrying into our family." Her perceptiveness was unnerving. "Partly," I admitted, "but also about the circumstances of how James and I met." You believe there was manipulation involved? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. The coincidences seem remarkable, I replied carefully. Your family acquiring Boston General, James appearing in my ER, learning you were the woman I helped in the park. Eleanor sipped her tea before responding. Life often presents such convergences, though I understand your skepticism. Then you can assure me these were genuinely coincidental events. Would you believe my assurance if I gave it? She countered. Her non-answer frustrated me. I discovered something interesting yesterday. The Hamilton Foundation makes substantial anonymous donations to medical charities, including several supporting emergency services. We support many causes, Eleanor acknowledged. Healthcare has always been a priority. Why anonymous? Most donors want recognition. True philanthropy doesn't require applause. Eleanor set down her cup. Emma, let me be direct. You're questioning whether our family orchestrated your relationship with James. Consider this logically. What purpose would such manipulation serve? James has dated socialites, business heirs, women with connections that would benefit our family. Why would we engineer his relationship with an ER nurse with student debt and no social connections? Put that way, my suspicions seemed paranoid. When you phrase it like that, I'm not dismissing your concerns. Eleanor continued, surprising me. In your position, I might harbor similar doubts. The Hamilton world can seem calculated and strategic because often it is, but not in this case. Then why keep our previous meeting secret from James? Why place the handkerchief in my room instead of simply acknowledging our connection? Pride, Eleanor admitted after a moment. I didn't want James or Richard knowing I had been so careless as to be accosted in the park. Richard already worries excessively about my independence. As for the handkerchief, I wanted you to know that I recognized and appreciated your intervention without making a public scene. Her explanation seemed reasonable, yet something still felt unresolved. There's another issue troubling me. The Hamilton business interests, are they all ethical? James has been vague about specific investments. Eleanor's expression sharpened. You've been researching us. Wouldn't you in my position? Fair point. Eleanor nodded. The Hamilton portfolio is diverse and complex. Not every investment would meet your personal ethical standards, I imagine. We have holdings in pharmaceuticals, military contracts, and yes, private healthcare systems that some might criticize as profit-driven. Her honesty was both refreshing and concerning. That's potentially at odds with my values as a healthcare provider. Which is precisely why James needs someone like you, Eleanor replied. Wealthy families can become isolated from real-world consequences of their business decisions. Your perspective would be valuable not just to James, but to the family's future direction. Before I could respond, I noticed someone approaching our table. To my shock, it was James, his expression a mixture of confusion and hurt. James? Eleanor seemed genuinely surprised. What are you doing here? My assistant mentioned your meeting when I was looking for you. His gaze shifted between us. What's going on? Why are you two meeting secretly? We're discussing concerns I have about our engagement. I said directly, unwilling to hide my doubts any longer. What concerns? Why wouldn't you bring them to me? Because some of them involve your family, I explained. The coincidences surrounding how we met your family's business interests, things you've been vague about. James looked wounded. You're investigating my family, questioning our relationship. James. Eleanor interjected calmly. Emma has legitimate questions that deserve honest answers. I would expect nothing less from someone joining our family. Her support surprised both of us. James sank into an empty chair, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I should have been more transparent. he conceded. But I never lied to you, Emma. Yes, our company acquired Boston General in a larger healthcare portfolio. No, I didn't plan to meet you in the ER. That sailing accident was genuine stupidity on my part. And your mother. The park incident. Pure coincidence, James insisted. Though finding out later that you were the woman who helped Mother that day, it felt like confirmation we were meant to meet. I studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Your family's business interests in healthcare, they concern me, especially the shift toward privatization and profit-driven models. The Hamilton Foundation also funds free clinics and medical research, James countered. Yes, we have business interests that make money, but we reinvest significantly in community health initiatives, which you never mentioned, because I didn't want you to think I was trying to impress you or buy your approval. James reached for my hand across the table. Emma, I fell in love with you because you're everything our world often lacks: genuine compassion, practical skills that actually help people, and the courage to act when others hesitate. When Mother told me about the woman who intervened when she was attacked, I admired that stranger without knowing it was you. Learning later that you were that person only confirmed what I already knew: you're extraordinary. Eleanor watched our exchange with an unreadable expression. If I may, she finally said, Emma has shown more integrity in questioning our family than most who eagerly accept its benefits without examination. James, your father, didn't marry me for the Hamilton fortune. In fact, he helped save it through hard work and ethical leadership. Perhaps it's time for fresh perspective in the family again. Her words carried unexpected approval. James looked at his mother in surprise, then back to me. I should have told you everything from the beginning, he acknowledged. No more secrets or vague explanations. Whatever you want to know about our family, our business, anything, just ask. And if I find aspects of the Hamilton enterprises problematic, I challenged, then help us change them, James replied without hesitation. I'm not my grandfather or even my father. Each generation has the responsibility to do better with the resources they inherit. Eleanor nodded slightly, a gesture of respect I hadn't expected. The Hamilton name carries influence that can be directed toward positive change with the right guidance. Their sincerity moved me. The doubts hadn't vanished entirely, but a path forward began to emerge, one where I might maintain my values while joining a family with the power to effect real change. I need assurances, I said finally, that I can continue my nursing career, that my voice will matter in family decisions, that we'll create our own path rather than simply following Hamilton traditions. You have them, James promised. I never wanted to change who you are. It's who you are that I love. Eleanor stood gracefully, gathering her purse. I believe you two have more to discuss privately. Emma, when you're ready, Richard and I would like to host a proper engagement dinner with your parents included, of course. This gesture of acceptance, acknowledging my family as equals rather than outsiders, spoke volumes. As Eleanor departed, James moved to sit beside me. I'm sorry you felt you needed to investigate rather than ask me directly. That's on me for not being more forthcoming. And I'm sorry for doubting you, I replied. But joining your family is intimidating. James smiled. Imagine how my father felt marrying the Eleanor Hamilton. At least your future mother-in-law already owes you her gratitude. His humor broke the tension, reminding me of why I had fallen for him in the first place. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but perhaps the differences in our backgrounds could become strength rather than division. And maybe, just maybe, I could help guide the Hamilton resources toward the kind of healthcare initiatives I believed in. We left the museum together, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight with renewed understanding. The engagement ring on my finger felt lighter somehow. No longer a symbol of an alien world I was entering, but a partnership where my voice and values would matter. 6 months later, I stood in a dressing room at Oakwood, wearing my mother's vintage wedding dress that Eleanor's personal tailor had altered to perfection. The Hamilton Estates gardens had been transformed for our ceremony with white roses and lilies, creating an elegant backdrop that somehow managed to feel intimate despite the 300 guests. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, adjusting my veil. As my maid of honor, she had been instrumental in keeping me grounded through the whirlwind of wedding preparations. "Still sure about this? Not too late to make a run for it?" she added with a wink. "Never been more sure," I replied honestly. The months following our confrontation at the Gardner Museum had brought significant changes. True to his word, James had opened every aspect of the Hamilton business to my questions. I discovered that while some investments weren't perfect, the family had been moving toward more socially responsible ventures over the past decade, a shift Richard had initiated and James was accelerating. Eleanor and I had developed an unexpected alliance. Her initial coolness had evolved into genuine respect, particularly after I refused to abandon my nursing career despite pressure from some family members. "A Hamilton wife has social obligations," James's aunt had insisted during one tense dinner. "And this Hamilton wife will fulfill them," I had replied calmly. "Around my hospital shifts." Eleanor had smiled slightly before supporting me. "Emma brings valuable healthcare expertise to the family. Her continued work keeps us connected to community needs." The most surprising development came 2 months before the wedding, when Eleanor approached me with a proposition the Hamilton Foundation wanted to fund a network of community clinics with me as consultant on the project. "Not to pull you from your nursing," she clarified, "but to ensure the clinics actually serve patient needs rather than donor egos." My dream of a community clinic was becoming reality on a scale I could never have achieved alone. The first would open near my old apartment in Boston, with others planned for underserved neighborhoods. A knock at the dressing room door interrupted my thoughts. To my surprise, it was Eleanor, rather than the wedding coordinator. "May I have a moment with Emma?" she asked Sarah, who nodded and slipped out. Eleanor looked elegant as always in a silver blue ensemble, but her expression held an unusual vulnerability. "I wanted to give you something before the ceremony," she said, opening a velvet box to reveal a pearl necklace with a small diamond pendant. This was my mother's and her mother's before that. In our family, it's traditionally given when a daughter-in-law has truly become a daughter. The significance of the gesture wasn't lost on me. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything." She fastened the necklace around my neck. "When we first met in that park, I saw your courage. When James brought you home, I questioned your motives. But over these months, I've come to admire your integrity and strength." "Even when I challenge family traditions?" I asked with a small smile. "Especially then." Eleanor adjusted the pendant. "The Hamiltons need periodic challenges to avoid complacency. Richard provided that for my generation. You'll do the same for James." "Thank you for accepting me," I said sincerely. "I know I wasn't what you expected for James." "You were exactly what he needed," Eleanor replied. "And what our family needed, though we didn't realize it." My father knocked gently before entering. "They're ready for us, Emmy." Eleanor squeezed my hand before departing. "Welcome to the family, Emma. Not as an outsider joining us, but as a new voice helping shape our future." As my father walked me down the aisle toward James, I saw my worlds merging, my hospital colleagues seated alongside Hamilton business associates, my modest family chatting comfortably with Boston socialites. Richard beamed proudly beside Eleanor, who wore the same handkerchief she had given me in the park, now tucked elegantly in her pocket. James's face lit up when he saw me, his expression reflecting not just love, but partnership and possibility. As I reached him, he whispered, "Ready for our adventure?" I was. Not because I had been accepted into the Hamilton world, but because we were creating something new together, a marriage and future that honored both our backgrounds while forging its own path. 6 months after the wedding, I still divided my time between hospital shifts and consulting on the Hamilton Community Health Initiative. The first clinic had opened serving patients regardless of insurance status, with a satellite facility planned near my parents' Vermont home. James had surprised everyone by taking a step back from family investments to launch a healthcare technology startup focused on improving hospital efficiency, inspired, he said, by watching my frustration with outdated systems in the ER. One evening, as we walked through Franklin Park near the spot where I had once helped Eleanor, James squeezed my hand. "Happy. Very," I replied truthfully, "though not how I expected to be." "How so?" "I thought happiness would come from my career alone," I explained, "then from finding love. But it's really about finding purpose together, using what we each bring to make something meaningful." James nodded. "Mother says you've revolutionized the Foundation's approach to healthcare giving, actually listening to patients and staff instead of just writing checks. Imagine that." I laughed. "Small changes can make big differences." "Like helping a stranger in a park," James suggested. "Exactly like that." I smiled, reflecting on how that single moment of courage had led to this unexpected life. Sometimes the smallest actions have the greatest impact. As we continued our walk, I thought about the journey from that morning in the park to today. The path hadn't been straight or simple, but it had led to something authentic and purposeful. By staying true to myself while opening to new possibilities, I had found not just love, but a way to amplify the difference I could make in the world. Life's coincidences, whether random or somehow meant to be, had brought me here, and for that I was profoundly grateful. If my story teaches anything, it's this: help others without expectation, stand firm in your values, even when challenged, and remain open to connections that might initially seem impossible. You never know when a simple act of courage might change not just someone else's life, but your own as well. Have you ever experienced a coincidence that changed your life's direction? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if my journey resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories and share with someone who might need a reminder that staying true to yourself can lead to unexpected blessings. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of bravery.